I guess the first question is, can you see,
Yep.
can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. There is some possibility, I have this Microsoft Surface, which I love, but it tends to overheat, especially when I'm video conferencing. So there's some possibility I may freeze at some point and have to reboot. That'll be embarrassing. But anyway, so yeah, so thanks for having me. And you know, as if you caught the preamble, I've been moving to New York City for the last almost 2 years now, and finally I'm here, and I'm thrilled to meet all of you and to have the opportunity to speak with you. And I hope this is the beginning of a long relationship, both collectively and individually, on my behalf, but also on behalf of the Case Center and the initiatives that I run. So really looking forward to continuing the dialogue after today. I will, as requested, keep this to about 45 minutes, so we'll go to 7. As usual, I've packed way too much stuff in here, so I'm going to go fast, and probably we'll have to stop in mid-sentence at some point when we run out of time, but I will try to keep on time. Just a little bit about me. Thanks for the introduction. I think, you know, for those, some of you know me through the grapevine. So I am currently full-time academic with Rensselaer Polytech. I run the Case Center, which is the kind of the New York City outpost of Rensselaer's architecture program. It was founded by a collaboration between Anna Dyson, who is really a visionary kind of designer / engineer. You probably know her currently at Yale. And Skidmore, Owens and Merrill. Bob Yorey was there at the time, and that's where I met him as well. So I've had a relationship with Case for a long time, but started formally as the director in January 2020, right before the world shut down. And this fall we will be officially open, and I'm really looking forward to, again, launching into the city on the back of events like this. Just before that, I think some of you know that, I mean, really one of my, I guess, most formative experiences was I was, for about 17 years, I was really head of technology for Frank Gehry's practice. First as the head of, director of computing and director of research and development around the late 90s. And then in 2002, we started the company Frank Gehry Technologies. That had a really interesting run as a software developer, BIM consultant, and toward the end, a kind of cloud data service company. And that company got acquired by Trimble. Some of the dates are wrong. In 2014, I was in Trimble, which is, I think many of you know, is a big company that owns products like SketchUp, et cetera, big in geospatial, et cetera, for about 3 years. And then I got an opportunity to go back to academia full-time as the director of the Digital Building Lab at Georgia Tech, which was run by a luminary named Chuck Eastman, who is really one of the founders of building information modeling, theory and practice writ large. And then, again, 3.5 years later, I started at Case. So I've been in both technology and practice. Before that, I was also worked as an architect, as an engineer, briefly for Arab startup companies, et cetera. So I've been on kind of all sides of the architecture, engineering, computing, academic, professional, startup, big company kind of worlds. Just you know, whoa, okay, everything went crazy. Let's see. Okay, so just a really quick shameless pitch for Case. Case is a really, I think, a very novel academic program that is kind of unique in that it's a very research-focused design program that really tries to bring science and engineering practices, mix them with design, and tackle things like environmental issues, climate change, you know, changes to professional practice, and then because of my background, bringing things like sensors, building information, the kind of whole design, automation, design for manufacturing, a piece of things, but the kind of, if it's a nucleus, It's really around environment, technology, and practice, and the synthesis of that through technology and automation and simulation and all the like. We have some great master science programs, PhD programs, professional certificate programs, one of which focuses on the technologies that I'll be talking about today, which is the data side of things. So if you're interested, look us up at case.rpi.edu, and please, as we open up physically, feel free to stop by at some point in Industry City. So, okay, on to the real agenda. I have a volunteer position as one of the technical directors for BuildingSmart International. I will talk about that, and this is really part of the purpose of this discussion is to reintroduce BuildingSmart to you, both the international program and the newly rebooted USA program. And then I want to get into an overview and occasional really deep technical deep dive onto some of the technology-related open data initiatives of BuildingSmart, and then we'll open up for questions and answers and anything else you guys want to do. So, BuildingSmart, you may remember it, you may know it. I would say, you know, it's very pejoratively, it's formally known as, this is the bad part, the Industry Alliance for Interoperability, or used to be called the IAI, and it's responsible for the development of the Industry Foundation Classes, or IFC. To the lay world, and actually even the more advanced world, IFC is known as a kind of a BIM exchange format that doesn't work. I think that is, you know, a little bit, dismissive of it. It is way more powerful than that, but when you see it as something that you just like hit a button in Revit, download some file, open it in some other, and expect, you know, round robin compatibility in the way that you might get from, I don't know, HTML or, you know, DWG or something like that. You know, that's been an aspiration of it that really hasn't worked. And it really shouldn't be seen as a black box file format translator that allows this BIM interoperability of files. It does work for that, but it takes a little bit of fussing, and it exposes some of the differences around BIM software in general. And anyway, that's kind of its path. And part of what I'm doing with some other, some other co-conspirators is to try to bring this whole idea of building data into the future on the back of this open data standard, which is widely, I think, adopted in Europe, less so in the US because the US seems to be very heavily Revit-centric, so we just use the Revit format. But if you look at the mission of BuildingSmart, I'm just going to read some of the. BuildingSmart is the worldwide industry body driving the digital transformation of the built asset industry, committed to delivering improvements by the creation and adoption of open international standards and solutions for infrastructure and buildings. It's a community working together to transform construction, design, operation, and maintenance of built assets. And it's basically open, neutral, and an international nonprofit. It also adopts a lot of the ISO standards compliance stuff that I really don't understand. I know it's important. It seems really like a really hard process to get ISO compliance, and I don't exactly know why people go through it, but it really is sort of the building industry arm that is developing these well-regimented standards that are adopted kind of globally. You know, that's one of its missions. This is another stupid little, you know, diagram that has the usual BIM model with a bunch of stuff around it. I'll invite you to read these because this is kind of an interesting kind of spectrum of kind of things that we're interested in, not just building information modeling, business processes, data exchange specifications, logistics, data dictionaries, operations, etc. But I would say that BuildingSmart International develops first and foremost a schema that may mean a lot of things and nothing to people, but it's a way of describing in a standard way what buildings and components and parts of buildings and how you describe these in a kind of a consensus-based agreed on way for their description, translation, storage, and processing. Increasingly, the BuildingSmart is, and you know, this is a passion of mine and why I'm involved. It is oriented increasingly to moving from file-based exchanges to the whole kind of new world of web and microservices data exchange. So it's really about kind of data science and data basing, data management, and these connected services that create a constellation of exchange of information among, yes, BIM authoring tools, but even IoT systems, a GIS, et cetera. I'll just hit, yeah. So these are some of the, and most of this presentation is going to be digging into the depths of some of this, but building data objects, not just the files, but the objects themselves or collections of objects, metadata, just like what is the stuff you tag? How do you tag BIM objects? How do you tag files? Things like comments and views, something called the Building BCF, BIM collaboration format, which is done really well as an exchange format, BIM to GIS, facilities management and digital twin. I think it's sort of what is called the curating agency now for COBE. I'll say that lightly because I think COBE is living in a bunch of different worlds, but it is adopting and migrating COBE as one of its portfolio of data formats and data standards. And then these are some of the stuff that we do. So develops and maintains, yes, data standards for buildings, but also increasingly infrastructure and transportation. We provide documentation, example files. We provide increasingly open source tool sets. We do certificate programs. We do award programs, community events, and a lot of stuff. So it really is a network of activity. My interest, it's organized by these what are called rooms, but really sort of divisions. Anybody can be a member and participate. You're free to go to the conferences if you want to actually drive some of this. I think you're supposed to be a member, or your company is. But again, a number of different divisions that are looking at various kind of domains. And then I'm sort of in this group that's working on the technical kind of architecture side of things. And then there's a bunch of other stuff too. So, and this diagram kind of talks about the evolution of the technical frameworks and technical portfolio. Suffice it to say things were moving pretty slowly because I think the historical way of developing standards was like watching paint dry. It was a very slow, deliberate consensus building exercise where, every 6 months people would get together somewhere internationally, they'd sit in a room, they would, again, pejoratively debate whether the default, orientation of a doorknob is counterclockwise or clockwise. You'd have to really beat the minutia of this thing to death, and you would do that every 6 months in person. And just suffice it to say, and based on some data architectures and conventions that were fairly legacy, were slow to move. And then, in the last decade, through the emergence of the web, there's been a revolution both in the underlying data encodings, but also the ways that that organizations advance collective consensus, right? So W3C, they do things in a different way that moves quite quickly. There's a reason that HTML6 comes out, or HTML7 comes out every couple of years. It's not because people sit in a room. They use kind of modern social media, GitHub, things like that. So we're moving kind of to a much more agile set of technologies and also set of procedures that I think are much more dynamic and also in line with the way the rest of the world works, again, driven by the Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts of the world, and the way that they work, and the standards and ways of the technologies that they develop too. So that's kind of the evolution of where we're going. This kind of says just, some of the things that we're working on. I'll talk about, I really want to focus on JSON and JSON LD. But again, I think I just said this, some of the technologies we're using, some of the services that we're using, GitHub, and then some of the standards that we're developing. This is the kind of the new framework. Some of the partners that are interesting to the U.S., you'll recognize some of these. This is a subset, of course. BuildingSmart International has a lot more partners, Autodesk, et cetera. GS1, I'll just point out one of the interesting ones. This is the barcode people who develop the standards for basically all products in the world, and there's some really interesting technologies that they're adopting that share a lot of synergies and also common conventions with what we're trying to do. Things like JSON LD or linked data, which we'll talk about in a second. So here's a kind of a view of some of the activities that BuildingSmart works on. The first one is the development of the schema. And some of you who are, data gurus know exactly what a schema is. There's a kind of a general shared convention of what that is, but it is a very sort of precise encoding of types of objects and their metadata, their properties, their relationships to one another, et cetera, encoded in perhaps an actual sort of what you want to call it a serialization like JSON, but increasingly developed in an abstract representation like UML, which is really, or Unified Modeling Language, which is really predominantly a diagramming convention that talks about how things go together that can actually be converted into, standard encoding. So there's a legacy version of IFC called 4.3, which again seems to be taking forever to finalize, but it's also expanded to cover new domains like roads, rails, et cetera. And, moving kind of leapfrogging ahead is this kind of nascent IFC version 5, which is going to be, and which is being developed as a wholly re-architected, again, UML, JSON, RDF, XML kind of based encoding with what do you call it? Continuous develop CDE, continuous development environments that when you make a change, you can essentially auto-generate all of the schemas and the definitions for these classes. If that sounded like gibberish, it probably was. So here's a little bit more of a view of what the standard looks like. This is a very tired diagram that some people have seen before. It basically says at the bottom of the definition are some really core conventions like geometry, like what is an integer, how do you describe a string, et cetera. All of this developed using a convention called STEP and something called Express, and there's a lot of expresses in the world, but it's a standard object relation encoding that is about 30 years old. It looks like Fortran, it acts like Fortran. It's pretty ugly, and I think it's one of the reasons that this whole thing has been slowed down. But suffice it to say, then layers and layers of increasing domain data, including what is here a much too small example for you to read. But this is the IFC wall automatic definition that describes what a wall is, what its attributes are. If you're familiar with auto-generated code documentation, library documentation, it looks like this. This is auto-generated, and it shows, again, what the class is, links to the superclasses, links to the attributes, links to candidate relations, et cetera. If you go on the web and look at IFC API, you'll find this, and you can navigate through this stuff, but it's really hard to read and understand. And again, this is being replaced by new stuff, but we're not losing the great work that has taken place over the last 30 years to actually describe the world of building things, that there are walls, they are related to spaces in certain ways. They have geometry, they have different types of geometry candidates. They have relationships to even things like people and actors and buildings and that kind of stuff. So we don't want to lose the domain knowledge that's been painfully built up over decades. We just want to bring it to the modern world where we can use the tooling that's available, prevalent in the world today. Another example, I think I might have dropped some slides here, shoot. Or maybe that was the slide, is this facilities management handover, which is, I believe is the modern kind of refactoring of COBE. For those of you that do not know, COBE is a standard for extracting data from a BIM model for the, I'm not really doing it justice. It is a full-fledged object relation schema in of itself, but its claim to fame is that it could be represented in a spreadsheet. So building managers could actually open this thing and say, oh, that's what you're talking about. There's my equipment. There's its type. There's its warranty information, right? So this is what really, I think, created the huge industry adoption around COBE is that building professionals, including maintenance people, could get this thing. At the same time, it was a full-fledged export from, a BIM model. But it suffices to say that the genius that developed this, Bill Eastman, I think he's out of either the Coast Guard or the National, what is it called? The Army Corps, I believe it was developed in. Anyway, he was sort of looking for a home to park this thing. Now he's sort of semi-retired. So it's been navigated, brought into the BuildingSmart community, and is becoming the basis for this facilities management handover standard, which is, again, sort of, I think, a rebranded version of COBE. So that's just one thing that is out there as well. Just in passing, new standards for things like bridges. The Chinese government has put a huge amount of money into infrastructure open data exchanges, and this piece is being adopted by the AASHTOs of the world, the transportation divisions of the states, the U.S. states. So there's a lot of mileage now being undertaken around open data standards for the exchange of highways, bridges, roads, all that kind of stuff. And that's actually going quite fast now relative to the building data side, the building side of things, but the building data side is fairly mature now, so it doesn't really need that much development. Okay, and then Ifc.JSON. So this is the program that I'm most responsible for, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on this and its extensions. And I'm going to start, I have to assume many of you know what JSON is. I wish I could ask for a show of hands or a nod. But JSON is really the open data format that drives the internet and specifically the World Wide Web. It's how web servers talk to web clients. It's how web services talk to other web services. Increasingly, it's how web servers talk to things like IoT devices. It is a kind of a universal encoding for data, very much associated with also things like NoSQL, things like MongoDB, and just the whole, it's endemic and sort of like Node.js, the whole Google stack is everything's just built on this framework. And so I want to spend a little bit of time on that. But the short version is we're developing a version of IFC that is JSON founded, and I think it's going to revolutionize the accessibility and also the prevalence of this open data exchange for the building industry. So really quickly, a couple bullets. Ifc.JSON is yet another schema and instance encoding of IFC, like a bunch of other stuff, but additionally uses contemporary data management and web services paradigms. It's human-friendly, flexible, and fault-tolerant. There's this huge ecosystem of tools, native support in things like Chrome, Node, which is kind of the headless version of Chrome, if you will. Supports these transactional partial model exchanges, querying, schemas, and validations. And I don't know what that is. Provides quickly scalable examples. Okay, so we have. Let's not worry about that. So really quickly, this is what JSON looks like. Basically, it is a text format, and it's broken down into two very simple concepts. The idea of a set of key value pairs, sometimes called a dictionary or synonymously called an object, which is a little bit bizarre. But basically, these are the parameters and their values, and they're represented in this format with closed brackets, the name of the parameter, the name of the value, usually quoted as strings, although sometimes it can be also numbers and other stuff. And then there are arrays or collections of these objects, which are just, again, collections. This is the notation for collections. You've got arrays, and you've got dictionaries or objects, and that's it. It's very flexible. The dictionary, the objects don't have to be consistent. They can be, but it's really sort of a dynamic approach to the management of data. Anyway, there's more to it, but that's what JSON looks like. It serializes and deserializes easily. That means we can turn the text into Python data or JavaScript data in a way that almost looks like it's the same thing. But of course, one can be operated by Python directly, or JavaScript in one is a text format that needs to be processed. In JSON, for example, in JavaScript, parsing a JSON file is a one-line command back and forth. So you take the text, you turn it into data, you take the data, turn it into text, and then you can move the text around on the web and other places. Okay, this is a little bit hard to see, but this is old school IFC. Looks to me like Fortran. Again, if you're old enough, you're probably not, but if you remember like some of these really old languages that are very much line-based, so you'll see these references from one line to another. It's almost impossible to parse for humans. There was an evolution of this to XML, which many of you probably do remember or still may see. That's a little bit easier to understand. Also things like, what's it called? Visual Studio Code will read it and color code it for you. And then now increasing Ifc.JSON, which you just scan down this. I mean, it's, to me, okay, maybe I'm being a little bit glib, but I can read this, right? This looks like a project. It looks like an object whose type is project. It's got a global ID. It's got a name. It's got a description, and then it's decomposed by things like a site, which has a name. Anyway, I mean, I can read this stuff. Humans can read this. Machines can read it, and that's the point, right? So this is what we're trying to do, is to take all of this, existing kind of conventions about how you describe objects, geometry, relations, blah, 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 and make it human readable and make it machine readable and make it part of the open data community. Just to say that there are different ways you can organize data. You can organize this as a flat list of objects in a single array, or you can structure it the way buildings might be structured, as a nested set of data from the project to the site to the building to the walls, blah, blah, blah. Both of those are okay. They're both supported. Parsers can deal with both of those. So let's just keep going. This is just a little bit, okay. So the other thing is that in terms of geometry, the ambition of IFC was always to develop full, really kind of live geometry interoperability, where you could take a Revit model, send it to, say, I'll say Digital Project, which is, or Bentley or Graphisoft or whatever, Graphisoft, and then read it back into Revit, and it would still be live. And it is doable, but the exporters don't actually support that. Whoever, pick your favorite modeler, is more interested maybe in getting data out than reading it back. But the bottom line is, it had this very rich kind of parametric description of geometry that is exceedingly verbose, exceedingly complicated, and is really where a lot of the errors, the reason that geometry doesn't always look exactly right when it gets brought into a different application, where that resolves. One of the other valid things, again, we're saying lots of opportunities, very flexible. One of the things is just to represent this geometry as meshes. And in specific, we've been representing it as OBJ data. By the way, I'm just going to pause. Is anybody still listening? Am I still live? Can somebody just say I'm not just talking to myself?
You are not talking to yourself, Dennis.
Okay, great. Okay. So one of the things we said is OBJ, which is, I think, what aliases standard, text-based, vertex and face-based mesh rep description. We're saying that's okay too, right? And then if we do that, then we don't have to have a solid geometry kernel in the client. We can just do mesh descriptions and just suffice to say that's almost built into a Chrome and other applications natively. It's certainly built into Rhino and Blender and things like that. So we're just passing around this mesh blobs. If you want to pass around the full gory geometric description, you can do that too. But we're simplifying things so that you don't need, again, a geometry kernel on every client, and the server can just send out meshes that the object, that the readers can read. So this is kind of what it looks like. I might show this really quickly. Yeah, let me pull this up just because I know I'm sure I'm running out of time. So I'm going to show you. Oh God, let's see if I can do this without shutting my machine down. So first, let's see. Yeah, I'm just leery that if I do this wrong, I'm going to blow. Oh no, I just shut down something important. All right, let's see. Okay, so first, this is just a view of in Visual Studio Code, which is one of the dominant open source application development environments. Just treat make this a little bigger. So this is an actual Ifc.JSON file. So there's a bit of a header, and then there's the data, and then there's, again, this flat list of objects. And here's one of them in no particular order. This is coming pretty much directly from Revit, although I think it was then converted through this Python converter. But you'll see there's its type. We've stripped off the IFC, and we're just saying it's a furnishing element. You can just scan through this. But this is all the data that came from Revit. And then there's a reference to a representation, which if I scan through and look for that, I will find, here's a universal ID. If I look for that, there's two instances. One is the reference, and one is the actual detail, which has that OBJ blob. It's very verbose, but basically just says bunch of coordinates, bunch of triangles, right? So that's, I mean, kind of all you need to know about Ifc.JSON at one level. That's how we're representing data in a way that I can read it, Chrome can read it, etc. So let me really quickly try to pull up again that viewer. We've developed an application, just a bunch of examples. Let's see if I get the right one. Okay. Oh, Jesus, this is pretty good. So I've got a couple of different examples. Okay, running on my server, on my actual client. Okay. This is just an example. It's been built in, again, Node.js, which is one of the dominant, again, it's kind of like Chrome without a head. It runs as a web server, or then you can attach things like, it allows you to run JavaScript on the server. And one of the things you can do with JavaScript on the server is run a web server called Express. And then you can do things like feed web pages. So I've got a couple of example files. This is the one that we tend to use, the duplex. It's actually an old kind of traditional Kobe file. This code it's very simple, it's very ugly, but it gives the examples. And then we're using something called JSON Path, which is a kind of very powerful text-based scripting language for doing searches through JSON files. So I can just run this query that says, just give me all of the walls, or just give me, let me see if this is true, an individual object and its global ID. So there's one object with a global ID. You know, just an example, I also have not running here the ability to run this on a MongoDB server, which is this NoSQL thing I keep mentioning. It's basically NoSQL, there's a bunch of different versions of it, but one of them is just you take this JSON data, you put it on a server, and you can traverse it. It's very different than the kind of structured SQL languages of the past. But just if I say I've got a couple different examples where you can run different queries on this, either on the client or on a server, just the example, and that source code is available. The other thing is just, let me see if I can do this. I opened the building and the inspector in Chrome. Let me just see if I can remember how I do this. If I go to the console, if I type BE list, maybe? Shoot, BE. Oh, okay, there it is. There is the actual, suffice it to say, you can find these objects themselves in the debugger natively. So I'm not doing a good job with this demo. But it just suffice to say, I think it's saying this is an array, and normally I would be able to open it and show an actual building object. Okay, I don't know why this is off the screen, but you can see that the building element list, the first instant, is that furnished element. This is a long way of saying, yeah, JSON is supported natively in Chrome, so you're just, you know, once you adopt Ifc.JSON, you're just a part of that whole community. And you get all of this tooling for free, and life is good. Okay, 15 more minutes. Okay, so the other thing that we did was develop a Grasshopper version of this, and we're sort of trying to enrich that out. But let's see. So here's the Grasshopper version that again has. Let's see. Okay, great. So just suffice it to say, there's a Grasshopper version where I can maybe select different files. I can take those Ifc.JSON queries and let's see, I think here's a bunch of different, JSON path queries. If I run a different one, I'll get a different filter. So I think these are, okay, these are all of the walls. Anyway, I'm just, again, using some Grasshopper nodes to process this JSON data, doing some color coding, et cetera. You know, all of these examples, let me get to that point. Okay, so we went through a bunch of this. Yeah, so these are the resources. Yeah, different ways of querying using JSON path, using Mongo queries, using what's called JSON schema queries. But again, this is just the bottom line is once we go into, I'm repeating myself, but once we go into Ifc.JSON, the whole kind of data science world and the web data world it's just open for us, right? So again, we're using GitHub as a way of getting this stuff around. So Ifc.JSON team is where we're parking all of this stuff. There's a Python-based schema generator. Let's not worry about that. A converter, which will take the Express file that you export from Revit, you know, when you save an IFC file and convert that using a Python script to Ifc.JSON. There's a SketchUp exporter, which if you open an IFC file in SketchUp, you can save it out as Ifc.JSON. This Node.js web framework that I mentioned, the Grasshopper importer, and then we even did a little Speckle proof of concept, which is an interesting subtopic. I'm sure people are going to want to talk about Speckle in a second. I can't resist, okay, and all of this is on this Ifc.JSON team. And I can't, let's see, okay, so really quickly, this is a whole other really dense topic. But there's an evolution of of JSON called JSON LD or linked data. And there's this world called the semantic web, which distributes and creates linked semantics, essentially these schemas where not only are they machine translatable, but the machines can look on locations, URIs on the World Wide Web to find the definitions of these data sets and also their interoperability to other data sets. That's called, there's a bunch of things, ontology web language or OWL, RDF, you might remember or have heard of some of those. There are ontologies for buildings, one's called BOT, building ontology, brick for, but there's this world of this kind of linked data that's emerging, again, being driven by Google and Facebook, I think, something called schema.org. This is, I mean, I can't do this justice, but suffice it to say that there are ways of sort of defining the data and pointing to namespaces on the web that both disambiguate what the thing is. So, and here's an example, you know, a name and an address of a person and a server, right? How do you tell the difference between these? And so these contexts, which are locations on the web that tell you how these schemas are developed and their relations to other things, allow you to navigate among these different domains of interest. So Ifc.JSON LD versus this GS1, the barcoding world. Microsoft is driving something called the digital twin description language, which is really sort of the relationship between buildings and IoT services. And all of this infrastructure and tooling is available in a way of connecting the actual semantics, what these descriptions of things actually point to, and their representations in their translations. So I'm not going to show you too much about that, but what I do want to show you is a kind of another open source project. Just suffice it to say, this allows us to retool data, turn it from one format into another, extract data we care about, convert it between different services that are talking about the same things but using different terminologies. And just a quick preview of a project I've been developing, which uses something called Node-RED, which is an open source built again on this JSON Node.js stack, which is kind of like a Grasshopper. It's a visual programming environment that's a prototyping environment specifically for IoT and for interoperability among web services. Maybe I should just leave it at that, but suffice to say that, yeah, we're developing a set of tools that allow us to connect things like Google Sheets to this JSON data sitting on GitHub, and we've actually developed a BIM viewer where you can connect this stuff up and start visualizing data and view it and then interoperate again. And again, I'll drop the Speckle name. We haven't really connected it to Speckle yet, but there's every intention to do so and just kind of open up that whole world to a world of data exchange that's kind of drag and droppable, where you can connect anything to anything. I like talking about the building industry bobblefish. You know, this is what we want. I want to be able to connect anything to anything and have the logic of that reside in the cloud. So it can say, oh, you're a Revit thing. Oh, you're a Tekla thing. We'll just hook you guys up. And the applications don't need to be worried about that. And all of this stuff is available to this community where you have the ability to create these connectors, transformers, extractors, et cetera. And now there are environments, including Grasshopper, but I think also this Node-RED environment, that are going to be really exciting places to create those networks of data transformers. And it sort of upends the view of the historical view of interoperability, which is, you know, what matters is the application. I plunk a file somewhere, and then these things have to say, oh, yeah, I got an exporter, right? You want to invert the whole thing and just have this network of devices chattering with other devices through these transmuters that are on the cloud. So that's the kind of architecture I'm really looking for the future. So that's, I think, the main body of my spiel. I'm going to close. Okay, so maybe three other things to mention back in the Building Smart world. One is they're going all in on this thing called the Building Smart Data Dictionary. And I would say that this is, the simple way of saying this is a one-stop web service with an API that is intended to host all of the kind of the namespaces of the world, including things like uniformat, master format, omni class, but also, you know, potentially taxonomies for products, you know, specialized things internationally, and also ways of converting among them. So language translation, et cetera. It sounds like a lot of gibberish, and it sort of is. I'll just run this demo. I'm not really that much associated with this project, but the idea is like kind of, again, a set of services where you can just go and say, okay, you know, I don't know my master format, you know, conventions, but 02031B or A102, what is that? Oh, it's a wall. You know, it probably is not a wall, but you know, how does that relate to other standards on the world for walls? Well, you know, here's how they relate. This is a demo of a tool. I believe there's one in Revit too. Let me run this, but also cut ahead a bit, even a bit more. But suffice to say, this is a plugin again in SketchUp, where I can click on an object. Seems like a lot of this demo is just navigating to the damn object. But here's an IFC file that's been brought into SketchUp, and I'm clicking on an object, and it shows me this is a wall, and also shows me these are all the candidate metadata that could be plugged into this wall. So here's its common properties. Is it external? Is it load bearing? How can I tag that thing, et cetera? That was a really quick demo. But that allows you to essentially just go and put all of the kind of the conventions about metadata in one place. So it's another service that BuildingSmart International is developing that fills out this kind of constellation, this new view of connected web data. There's another set of initiatives called the openCDE initiatives, or the common data environments. This is more, I'd say, crassly about metadata on files. So in things like project file or project data repositories, how do you manage permissions on things? How do you manage the metadata about who owns stuff, what's in the file, et cetera? There's a property exchange, which I won't go into, but where the actual sort of properties for objects might lie. And then there's this BCF format, which I think some of you may know is a way of taking really something like either like just like a snapshot view, like here, or even like an RFI, and wrapping that in an open standard that can be exported from a lot of different things like SketchUp. I think certainly the Nemetschek folks, Tekla and Graphisoft and Vectorworks, they support this. But basically, I can make a view and say, hey guys, look at this, package that with the reference to the files, ship that around, and when you open that in your viewer, you'll see the objects that are highlighted. So, and a bunch of foundational APIs, which are again REST APIs that are being developed to create those services. So that's a big initiative. Other things that are looking at building information, BIM to BEM, building energy modeling, that's a whole world in and of itself, and then digital twins and GIS, right? These are some of the general initiatives. How am I doing for time? 7:02, 2 minutes left. So, invitation to join us in the same way that I'm hoping to join you guys in the Revit users group community. I would be delighted to be the kind of the point of entry for any of you that are interested in participating in this. I think you'd get a sense of where my orientation is. But what we're trying to do with BuildingSmart US is develop, really some of the US-based standards that are required, the data and data conventions that are unique to the US, things like what AASHTO needs, what the GSA needs. There's really not that many people to point to, but really, there's the master format, uniformat world. I have been in conversations with leadership in US-based companies that go, Jesus, why can't we just have a basic convention for what every Revit file should have on it, right? Well, that might be something that we actually take on as BuildingSmart US, or some of these technical deep dives, which is really where my heart is, developing connections, developing, if you are somebody that's working on, I don't know, a ladybug or a kangaroo or something like that, or a HyPAR, we really hope you'll get interested in this Ifc.JSON format, because again, once you adopt it, you're just hooked into this whole world. These are the people to contact. What else do I have? There's a monthly webinar series that you can join. That's free to the world. We'll do a technical deep dive kind of again in a month or two, and then you can just scan through. We're looking at the OpenBIM and OpenGIS and talking more about some of the stuff I pointed to today. And then there's the usual web, LinkedIn resources. So if you're interested in anything we discussed, here's my coordinates. Here's the BuildingSmart US coordinates. Thank you for your time. Really looking forward to connecting with you in the future, and any comments or questions or just soapbox manifestos you might want to effuse while we have people in interest to effuse them. Thanks for your time.
Excellent, brilliant. You lost me for a few bits there, which is simply a testament to I'm not as data literate as you are. But overall, really fascinating stuff. So folks, do you have any questions? Michael Coffey, this is like right down your aisle. Tell me you've got questions. I know you. Don't mean to call you out like that, but come on, this is your wheelhouse. What do you think?
Yeah, that's why I joined today. Trying to just gather information about what's going on.
All right.
Did I completely talk past people? Did any of this resonate? Is this whole JavaScript JSON thing, do people know about that at all, or am I kind of way off base here? That could be
I know about it. I haven't used it very much, but do know about it.
All right. Well,
I think this was a good introduction, though. It's simple enough, and you run through explaining them. I think this was really nice in that way. And younger generation people use these tools more than us, maybe. But we all have to understand at this point, especially with interoperability issues and being able to customize things as needed. I think it's a great introduction for those who doesn't even know about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to jump on my soapbox, I mean, I just think it's imperative that our community joins the rest of the data and, the data world, and this stuff isn't, I guess this is maybe the first time some people have been seeing this, but, if you pull a kid out of high school, I mean, that's taken a computer science class or a web development class, I mean, they're gonna have seen this, and that's my mission, is to get this, the whole BIM IFC world has been locked into these, domain experts, and it's just unintelligible, and maybe this was unintelligible too, but it's not. This is something that you take one web development class, you are on the train with this, and maybe I'll do my shameless plug again, which is we are developing at CASE a set of professional courses and professional certificates that take you from never having touched a line of code to being gurus both at this open data world, and also things like Revit plugins, Rhino plugins, etc. Rhino, I think some of you may have heard of Rhino Compute, where they are taking the Rhino and Grasshopper engine and just making it accessible to everything, right? So this is, open up the hood of Revit and Rhino and the World Wide Web and Chrome, and this is what you see under there. So, if it's at all interesting to you guys going forward, I hope you'll look us up and learn more about it. Charlie, help me out here.
Yeah, no, totally. Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I mean, I echo, Dennis's sentiment in the early beginning of like how clunky IFC is and all that, or like the old school IFC is. I've looked into it a number of times, and every time I look into it, I go into it with all this excitement, and then within a couple hours, I'm like completely defeated, and I want to change careers and everything. But this is the first time I've ever seen to this level of depth the Ifc.JSON, and this is huge. I feel like it's a huge game changer, because I mean, to kind of help maybe wrap folks' mind around things, like every time you click, file save as, or file export, or file import, or any of those options, right? You're basically degrading your model and your data, right? So whenever it goes somewhere, you're going to lose something, and then you do file import and you bring it into somewhere else, you're going to lose something else. So it's a very lossy environment, and a lot of us in the industry got frustrated with it, and over the years said, screw it, we're just gonna, write this out in like a table format or in a database or in the schema and whatever. And we've all been generating these schemas, right?
Yeah.
A point is X, Y, and Z coordinates, right? But if you were to go to Hypar, if you were to go to Speckle, if you were to go to Flux, if you were to go to Construe, if you go to all these other, interop kind of solutions, they will describe a point completely different, even though it's only three coordinates, right? So now to be able to have this Ifc.JSON, which is kind of independently driven in a way, so it doesn't have like a hidden agenda. It's not like a product market that's trying to buy into our schema and then you're locked into it forever, sort of thing. So this is I think is a huge game changer, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'm seeing too, is like, because there wasn't anything that worked, all of these different organizations are developing their own schemas, but they're all largely JSON. They're just, look at Bureau Happold object model. If you guys haven't heard from the Bureau Happold guys, you really should sign them up for a presentation, because they're doing brilliant stuff in this world. But they've developed their own JavaScript encoding for structural steel, as and other things, right? As has Thornton Tomasetti with Construe. Now, not only is Ifc.JSON intended to be, the true open, neutral version, but some of the coding I glossed over promises that it can be the interoperability switching yard that can automatically convert just by removing, as you said, like refactoring what a point looks like from one format to another. So some of these converters offer the promise, like, we don't need to beat up the world and say, you know, get rid of Bill-Happold object model and adopt Ifc.JSON. We can actually say, just develop the connectors, the transformers that turn your data into our data. And once you do that, it becomes part of this network of data sources and converters, right? I mean, so that probably started dipping into gibberish again. But the point is, we're not really I think BuildingSmart is no longer trying to develop the one standard to rule them all. We are now trying to develop the network of open standards and toolings that allow everything to connect to everything. And that's a huge mission. And, you know, I think you will never be able to take a whole Revit model, export it, and then turn it into, you know, magically a whole Tekla model, because Tekla doesn't support half of what Revit does anyway, you know. So as you said, it will be lossy. But a lot of the transactions aren't, you know, there's always a supposition I'm going to take my whole model and send it to somebody else. And my counterexample is, I just want a damn door schedule, right? Can I get out of everything, you know, I want to ask for the doors on the second floor. I want to get their fire rating, their height, their width, you know, and their finish, right? And I ought to be able to do that with anything, right? And so a lot of the kind of the real interoperability use cases, to me, are very small things. You know, I just want some data. You know, I don't want true, you know, 100% interoperability. Anyway, you know, so that's kind of what I'm seeing, and that I think is one of the really powerful opportunities behind this. Is just like, you know, go ask for some data and get what you want, and don't worry about, you know, getting the whole damn model and all of its scory geometry and all that kind of stuff.
Dennis, Dimitri, the founder of Speckle, just posted his PhD thesis online, and there's a whole section about data interoperability that dives into exactly that, you know, the sort of the fallacy of like the whole model, and that you can have federated models that selectively query other things, and that's not a bad process, like to your point. So thanks for this overview. I mean, it's exciting to see. I mean, I'm certainly hopeful. Whenever I try to explain this concept to folks, the first question I always get is when. So I'm not asking you when, but are there some goals that BuildingSmart has for a development timeline on this? Yeah.
I mean, there are roadmaps. The answer is a lot of it is now. You know, I mean, you know, I pointed you guys to the Ifc.JSON team GitHub. That is live. You know, I wouldn't say it's still evolving a little bit, so not everything quite works with everything 100%. You know, we need to continue. It's a volunteer thing, so we keep needing to upgrade it. The BuildingSmart Data Dictionary is super live right now. You know, it is, but it's a very small piece of the overall puzzle. And I think the openCDE thing, you know, there are real APIs that are starting. The problem is, again, is a lot of this is oriented to, well, it's a growing community, but it's only about 100 consumers. It's whoever is responsible for interoperability in Revit, you know, in AutoCAD for that matter, in Tekla, you know. It's the software implementers that are supposed to take these services and work with them. I'm interested in this other community, frankly, the Speckles of the world, the Hypars, the kids in school, you know. I think that's what's, you know, we've got to get that community actually working with this stuff. And of course, you know, in every, you know, kind of forward-looking professional firm, there is a Robert Yorey, you know, who's, you know, and I don't know if it's you or somebody that works for you, but there's somebody who's hacking these custom applications, right? So it's those people, and I think some of you people, that this really should be made available to, right? But it is live, and more, you know, you know, some of the roadmaps are 5 years out, but some of them are 6 months out.
That's great. I mean, I'm hoping, one of the things that I'm hoping is that expanded community will help break the logjam around application certification. So the last time I looked into this deeply was probably a little over a year ago. And I remember at the time that there were only like 2 or 3 applications that were IFC4 certified. Everything was still 2x3. So, you know, I mean, it's another, I mean, not to sort of go down that rabbit hole, but I think, you know, it's been a real challenge because IFC, you know, frankly, the differences between 4 and 2x3 were, you know, really nice. However, in the things that we were developing, we ended up having to do 2x3 just because that's what the rest of the world that we were talking to was on. So I like the idea of this being more community driven rather than sort of locked behind the gates to these, you know, 100 people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think some, you know, again, there's this kind of glacial paint drying version of this that I think is 4x3 is still kind of in that world. And there's a sense that we have to get, we have to get at least one rev out using kind of the traditional stuff. But after that, the whole thing's going to be re-architected, and it's being re-architected now. So 5, I think, honestly, I shouldn't say it, but I think 5 is going to eclipse all this other stuff, and it's kind of even. I think it's, again, it's usable even before it's an adopted standard. You know, I mean, there's no reason you can't, you know, go into download, you know, export a Revit file, run this converter. We now have these like drag and droppable utilities, you know, and then just start playing with the data, you know. So I think that's where my head is, and I can't speak for the rest of the community. I certainly is an old guard that wants to make sure that the world of the past is respectfully preserved, and I think that is a valid concern. But you know, I'm all about the future.
No, but that's the beauty of it. Anyone that's using any of the modern tools, Charlie, that you mentioned, or writing their own, I mean, none of those are certified either. Right, so I think it's sort of there is a layer of folks in organizations, whether they're writing standards or whether they're writing specifications for RFPs, that oftentimes, you know, get hung up on a particular standard because it's certified as something. But but I know many of us on this call and elsewhere, you know that that's kind of just what you do, right? Like to say, okay, well, yeah, sure, we can get you that too, but how we actually work, you know, we'll go over here and get the work done, and then kind of backdate it, so to speak, to make sure that it meets your certification. I mean, in some ways, it's what Gary and others, Gary primarily, did with drawings, you know, in making the models. Is fine. We'll give you the drawings because everybody needs the drawings, but you know, we'll go ahead and find a better way to work. And just because you asked for the drawings, we'll find a way to get you the drawings too.
So my question is,
can you please touch on the certificate programs that you are working on?
I'm sorry, is that Eugene? I can't quite hear you.
Yes. So can you please touch on some certification programs for scripting and API that you're developing?
So BuildingSmart US is developing a certification program for you know, BIM interoperability, but not at this level yet. If you're interested in becoming trained and certified, I would, you know, reach out to me. This is the programs we're trying to build in New York City for the emerging, what I hope will be the emerging building data community. You know, and we'll just, I'll talk to you about, you know, what we can offer now. You know, again, the version 5 stuff, everything I talked about now is not at the level of like rubber stamp compliance. So, you know, so it's a little bit premature to say, okay, let's get you a certificate, you know, an official, you know, that you know the standard. But in terms of like learning about this stuff and becoming a guru and actually getting a certificate to doing it, that's what the CASE program is starting to develop, and I'd be thrilled to talk to you about that more.
Thank you, Dennis.
Oh, so one question I have is, so this is basically out for individuals to use, right? Because it's open source and all, right? And I think that's fine and dandy, and I can see the adoption of it from individuals like ourselves that, just want to go in and encode something and move data around, right? But the question I want to pose to you is, so when you talk to the folks like the Trimbles and the SketchUps and the ArchiCADs and the Revits and so on, right?
Yeah.
Historically, with IFC, they've adopted it, and I put that in air quotes, and they basically adopt the things that they like, and then just kind of, they hit the checkbox, and then they
Yeah.
move on, right? So they didn't really fully adopt it, but they say they adopted it, right? So
Yeah.
how do we get, as a community, how do we get those folks to drive it as adoption on their end?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's looming in front of me, because I think the next thing is, well, let me also say that, we have a bit of a hacker group. I mean, it's really the Ifc.JSON development team, but it's a bunch of hackers that get together every week. I think we're going to, in the fall, make it more public. So if you want to join this and do some hacking, we'll have kind of regular, we meet Thursday mornings at 10:30. So every other week, it's a little bit of a growing group. We haven't, I think, done enough of a job to really evangelize this yet, partly because we're having so much fun ourselves. But one of the things that is a clear opportunity that I should do and just haven't done yet is, the Open Design Alliance, which is this open source not-for-profit company that produces the libraries that generate IFC, IFC-XML, blah, 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 blah. One of the things that's kind of on my to-do list is to go to them and just say, will you adopt this? And so far, they've been pretty willing to adopt anything. So once we do that, it becomes a candidate because even Autodesk, shockingly, who was like kind of the arch enemy of the Open Design Alliance for a long time, they now have just, I think, decided to use their IFC translator because it's kind of becoming the industry standard. So that's one of the things we can do, is just get it into software, or at least into developers' hands through the Open Design Alliance. The other thing is, just starting to go to, I haven't yet figured out who in the Autodesk community is working on, I know that they're working on schemas. I know they're working on their own proprietary schema. I know that Bentley is doing it. I'm sure there's a JSON encoding of it, and at least kind of getting this in front of them and encouraging them to develop again, if they've got a slightly different schema, that talks about walls in a slightly different way, getting them to develop one of these converters, which is different than developing a whole exporter, right? But they have cloud services, and also developing these Node-RED components that will allow this kind of plug and play network of these things. I guess I'm not starting to babble. There's a lot of things we can do. I think it will be incremental, and I think the things that will really drive it will be kind of grassroots. I haven't gotten back to EMPO yet. When I first spoke to him about this, he said, "But if you develop this the right way, I'm not even going to develop my own format. Like, why would I? Because he's developing his own schema." I think those people will be kind of next, first in line. And then we'll see. But it's going to take a community effort, and I have to, me and the other people have to now start getting out there and getting the community to use it. There's something called Ifc.JS. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a JavaScript. It's a web viewer, really interesting, kind of that allows you to view native IFC in a really efficient WebGL. It's actually using what's called WebAssembly and binary encoded blobs. So they're doing a really efficient job, kind of a separate initiative. Let's see if I can pull that up. it's a really interesting initiative by some, the other thing is like this stuff all is happening a lot more in Europe than it is here, which is kind of the sad thing. A lot of this stuff is being adopted both because governments ask for it and because there's sort of the DNA around that. But I'm still sharing my screen. Yeah.
Yep.
So Ifc.JS is kind of, it's a parallel but related initiative to develop a lightweight BIM viewer. Somewhere let me look see if there's a video for it. But it turns out that there's a lot of compatibility between what they're doing and what we're doing. And we're looking to integrate with that.
Well, sorry. Reba is
It's maybe too slow to try. Let's see.
Dennis, do you mind sharing these links in the chat with everyone? Like this one and the previously showed the Vimeo.
Ifc.JS. Sure. But I think if you just type Ifc.JS, you'll find better links than I have. And its main, no, this isn't the right one. This looks like a very laborious, this is certainly not it. Okay, yeah, so they've got a web viewer that is very scalable, partly because, and it reads good old-fashioned IFC in natively, and it actually has a geometry kernel in the browser, which is pretty ridiculous. But what it produces as its own intermediate format is a lot like what we're doing. So I think this will be kind of part of the network of interesting. I will certainly, since you asked, I'm going to just throw that in the chat. But where is that one?
No worries, I just.
But anyway, one of the Ifc.JS. I can find the chat. More. Yes. Sorry, I'm unable to find the chat now.
It should be at the bottom.
Let me stop sharing my screen.
You know all of this and you don't know where chat is.
Some reason it's always the hardest thing to find in these websites. You'd be surprised by the things I don't know that I stumble through. Certainly video conferencing is not one. Ironically, yeah, my original task at MIT as a PhD was to be Bill Mitchell's video conferencing operator. But now I can't make this stuff.
That's all right. If you want to, you can take a few minutes to gather some links that you consider interesting and drop them in an email for me. I will copy that over into the meetup, into the comments on the meetup, along with the video when we post the video.
Great.
Okay. I can dump all the links in there also.
Trying to remember who I insulted. No, you just reminded me that that this is recorded. Thanks for the reminder. Hopefully nobody too. Hopefully not. Hopefully I haven't made too many enemies out there. But there's always somebody who'll take offense at something. So.
Well, at least you'll know when the video is posted. You'll start getting angry emails or something.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
I think this was absolutely marvelous. As Ilkay said, a beautiful intro for some of us who are not that deeply into it and why we should be. Thank you so much. Let's as we talked about before this entire thing started about 2 hours ago. Let's stay in touch about all of this and see how and what we can do together over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And just if you're at all not just this stuff, but if you're at all interested in any of the programs I've talked about, go to case.rpi.edu and just like us, sign up, whatever. So we keep you informed of upcoming events from our side. And now that the city's hopefully opening up, I very much hope to see you guys in person. And if you ever want to drop by, we're an industry city, which is not as far away as it seems. If you take the A train or whatever it is, not the A train, but whatever it is. There's a train that goes right there. So look us up, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of you in the coming years.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. And we'll, as I said many times, but I don't think this time, if any of our attendees has an idea for a presentation, be that yourself or be that a question you would like to see answered, let us know, drop us an email. We are currently procuring speakers for the fall sessions. So let us know and what you're interested in so that we can, hit the mark. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you.
we'll see you next time around. Bye.
Okay.
Thanks,
everybody.
Dennis.
See you later.
Bye, guys.